One of my interests has been, and you've probably seen my video on my years in India with Sai Baba, but since then a lot has happened, and I had a major sort of wake up in India, a giant one, a huge one, in which my whole worldview shifted, and everything I thought was real kind of wasn't. Very much like the movie The Matrix. The wake up I had was extensive, and my whole worldview changed, and I realized, what had seemed reality really wasn't. A really good example of that, and in this talk we're talking about the New World Order, and that's when that word was used by George Bush's father in his 1,000 Points of Light speech. You're going to hear people talk about the New World Order more and more. Barack Obama has extensively. A lot of the big heavies that we see in the media drop it now and then. What's going on? What we also see, and we're now talking about the wake up, is the incredible downsizing of America, the national debt, the loss of freedom, police state stuff. So I'm going to make sense of some of this. It was part of my wake up. Part of my wake up was when I returned to India to get my book published, and you saw that book in the last video. And suddenly I'm staying with a friend, and I find this small, sort of low edition, lousily published book by an Australian, and he did it in Hyderabad. It was about the mystery of what's going on. It had a bad title, but within it was just mind-blowing stuff. And in my awakened state, the interconnection of global banking to create a world state blew my head off. I knew it was real. He even had the interconnected banking merchant bankers behind the Federal Reserve in a chart. We'll go into them later. Let's back up. If there's an agenda going on, I believe there is, it serves the purpose of the agenda to have most people absolutely sleeping through it. They don't want people to wake up. So let's kind of back into this in a different way. Let's go back to the Matrix. The first one was very powerful, and in there, Neo, the hero, wakes up to what's really going on. We take for granted with him the normal workaday world. People strolling through busy streets, reminds you of Manhattan, cafes, eating at restaurants, hanging out, life as usual, going home. All of it's a lie. When Neo wakes up out pulls this cord out of the back of his head. He's in a fake uterus, sits up and looks out at this field, millions of people hooked up to the same thing, providing energy to what's really ruling the world. And in this science fiction, it's a massive computer. There have been 3 or 4 world wars. The human race has lost it. It's kind of like the Terminator series, but taking it further. At this point, all the humans are vassals. They're kept subjects under these powerful interlocking computers who hold the human race in utter hostility. At this point, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, his mind is completely blown. But what he learns, he can use to navigate in this cyber world where everyone's caught. And so that is really the theme of the traumatic wake-up, that at great expense these network mega computers had created a seamless reality that seemed real. And so the bottom line is that everyone believes the illusion, okay? Pretty powerful stuff. And he ends up, of course, being a minority of a minority. I mean, a fractional number of people really have woken up in the Matrix. And a great example for maybe what's going on with the New World Order and people waking up. Another example is a stage magician. I often think of this. Recently, there'd been a weird event, but what happens with a stage magician is they'll have the whole audience in their hands like putty, except maybe 2 or 3 people. Big audience. Everyone falls under. You see him give them the hypnotic subjective. He walks them through hypnotic subject. Let me re-put that. The hypnotist on stage knows how to program the people. He starts them out with their concentration on something. It might be a dot on a screen. It might be something else. He gives them hypnotic suggestions through this. And all of a sudden, they're all under. I mean, before you know it, all but maybe 3 believe they're on a jet for a tour to Thailand or Africa, you name the place. He tells them to fill in the details. He gives them a post-hypnotic suggestion, and when he wakes them up, they all believe they actually took the tour to Africa or Thailand or wherever. The 3 that didn't go under are looking around amazed that everyone absolutely believes it. This is a reality about human consciousness that we need to be aware of. A really powerful example of this is someone I think is probably the most brilliant cinematic genius, maybe of all time. His name is Stanley Kubrick. He passed away on the film that we're going to talk about. Here's a guy with incredible range who saw outside the box. He was decades, way before his time. He did a movie called 2001, way before 2001, about some pretty powerful stuff. He did Clockwork Orange, another futuristic world of where they need to control human behavior, way before its time. His last film really lets the cat out of the bag. It's called Eyes Wide Shut. And he actually died within the week or so of the film being finished. Now, if you haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut, most people miss the point of the film. It's not about sex. It's not about hedonism. He's pulling the veil way back, and he says to the poor public that does not know what's going on, "Behold, gaze upon your rulers. These are the ones who really control the world, not your elected politicians or talking heads. Not the anchors on television, talking heads. Not the paid and bought for movie stars or media people, or frankly academics or otherwise people that are bought off. They're never going to tell you what's going on." In Eyes Wide Shut, we're taken, Tom Cruise, it's interesting, plays the main role. It's just the last thing he did where his marriage broke up. And you see him as a very ambitious MD. And it reads very true to a lot of people who want to go up the ranks, who want to go up the elevator of success. They're very willing to sell out. And so basically, he runs into an old college friend who plays the piano for the elite of the elite of the elite. And he finds out the password to get in, and he goes off and gets everything he needs to go to the great ballroom, the great estate. And your images of Rockefeller come to mind. And these are the inner circle, the most powerful people on earth, we're told. So basically, Cruise is wearing a mask. He wanders in there, And this is really Kubrick's message. As I said, behold, these are your rulers. These are the billionaires. These are the people you will never see and never encounter. When you wander down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan and a block-long limousine rolls by with tinted windows, you will not see who's inside. If you did, you would not recognize that person. But that person is one of the people that really, really rules the world. Through corporations, through banking, through stuff you're never going to see about. And what does Kubrick show us about our invisible rulers? That they live in a world that the man on the street will never understand. It's a counter-morality. It's an anti-morality. Frankly, it's probably Luciferianism or Satanism. Their God is the God of this world. They hold all the classic virtues in utter contempt. They hold good in contempt. They are ruthless manipulators. We get the feeling that one of them is going to leave and control one of the giant media conglomerates and announce what's going to be on the news that night. They pull the strings of the presidents, of all the talking heads that are under them. It's a very compelling vision of the hidden cabal. And it was very interesting that when Kubrick died, I think there was a real wrestling match over who would control the film. But the film came out, and it's worth watching. You have this group gathering together, all wearing masks, all about to have an orgy. They're going to have a human sacrifice that night, too. The pianist that clued in Tom Cruise, the young medical doctor in this film, is taken care of. They can take care of anybody. It's almost like you think, well, gosh, you've got the whole world, but you've done a blood oath or something, because they can control you and they know where you are. It's a pretty miserable world from my perspective. It's a satanic world. And the hyper-ambitious are willing to cut little deals. I mean, you know, on a lesser level in politics, this is going on. When Bill Clinton saw Kennedy, he would give anything to be president. And when he gave his acceptance speech for the Democratic nomination, he mentioned one of the heavyweights of the global cabal, a guy named Carol Quigley, who'd been a professor at Harvard and Georgetown, who wrote a book that was so in your face called Tragedy and Hope, A History of Our Time, that Prentice Hall, whatever big publisher did, I've got a copy, had that thing taken out of libraries, out of bookstores, shredded, shut down. The thesis of the book is there are people so powerful that their agenda to have a world order cannot be stopped. Again, this isn't some wacko conspiracy theorist wearing a tinfoil hat. This is an Ivy League professor who, quote, saw their documents and rubbed shoulders with these people. He'd gone to the big living rooms, drawing rooms in Europe. Tragedy and Hope, A History of Our Time. It was finally reprinted in Taiwan. Very heavy thing. He also corroborates the whole idea that these people are beyond normal morality. They're beyond normal intelligence. They make the man on the street look like the sheeple they believe he is. So we can back out of Eyes Wide Shut, what Kubrick's depicting, and say, are there other examples that we can penetrate what these people are? And a really good example is the vampire. And you even wonder when the vampire entered fiction originally, during the Edwardian era and before, certainly Bram Stoker's Dracula, whether that wasn't another veiled way of talking about the real world rulers, the incredible corruption, the immense wealth, the living by other standards. I mean, the classic vampire is no longer a human being. It's supernaturally endowed. It lives centuries. It's superhumanly intelligent. It's amassed a fortune. It easily travels through Europe and America. It's got limitations, of course. It's superhumanly strong. It holds people as nothing more than lambs to slaughter, to sheep, is really a blood source. There is no nobility of purpose in these things. So the vampire is a very powerful image that we could say, well, if we were to try to imagine what one of these people in the block-long stretch limousines is like, who's over billions of dollars, that's interesting. Have you ever wondered why we hear about the Federal Reserve all the time, but not once are you ever really told who really owns it? Is that kind of interesting, maybe? They're over trillions of dollars. No politician will tell you. Most probably don't know. Is that vaguely interesting who they are? That through fractional reserve banking interest, they can accrue as much money as a country's worth. I mean, part of the game in this New World Order is you get countries so in debt that they finally end up owing what they're worth. How easy it is to pay that? I mean, right now we're hearing that Obama wants to knock us from 14 trillion to 16 trillion. He's no great friend of America. Come on. Do you know who got him activated? We're not going to go into that. People end up in politics, I believe, whose interest is not the people in the country they serve. That's an understatement. Again, are you vaguely interested in who owns the Federal Reserve? I mention it in this book. There are only a few books that do. Let's hope I don't get wiped out soon. I'm not even going to tell you now. There is an elephant, of course, in America's living room, and I won't say who it is. You can connect the dots if you're interested in time. My book goes into some of that. When I ran into that book in Bombay, and by then I had a conversion. I believe that there's a real God in the universe. I believe there's good and evil. I think my former Hindu view, my Vedantic worldview, that it was all Maya and illusion and that we're really gods inside, I think that was part of the great lie. I had my own wake-up call, as I said, in India, at great cost. I saw this book in Bombay, and I saw the patterns of the giant banks, the families of the banks, the relatively old merchant banks of Europe that have accrued vast wealth. Let me create an understatement about all this. It was not exactly politically correct. But something in me went into an alarm gear. It was like Neo waking up in the Matrix, and I thought, wow, you don't need to fire a single shot. Of course, you're going to use armies in wars to do nation changing and change borders and all that. That's always happened. People in the know when an area of the world's going to get hit, they buy up real estate after it's devastated, and then they make a fortune. This has been going on for a long time.